the doorway out of ordinary
All right,
time.
good afternoon, Earth. This is Adam Sturch podcasting from the Mushroom Mansion, Taos, New Mexico, working on oil painting as of yet unnamed. It does have a concept behind it, though. I just, about 3 days ago now, did a high-dose trip with a strain called Burmese, and I was thinking about the various presentations of these different strains of mushrooms, psilocybin mushrooms, and I've done the Burmese about 3 times, 4 including one with Syrian rue, and each time, regardless of the content of the trip, the color of the presentation has been very pastel, light, bright whites, yellows, blues, pinkish, mauve, purples, very cool, light colors. So, and last night, or 4 nights ago, the introduction of the visions, I should call it, because there's always like an initial wave of hallucination where the visions are very profound and vivid. And this trip, they presented themselves, I guess they were entities. In hindsight, at the moment they didn't really seem as such, but they were animate and personable, but they looked like pieces of paper, I guess, stretched, long, flat, bright, glowing sheets that were all swirling around and kind of dancing like fish. So I'm going to try and get that down before, while the vision is still fresh, and play with that idea some, as well as the color scheme of this type of mushroom. So here we go. I'm going to start with some mineral spirits washing across the surface, and then I have some pastel blue, light pink, and then some yellow, warm gray, and white mixed up to start with the paper entities.
We don't have that kind of time. We have to dream it up. The submarine is sinking. Now, what are you going to do about it? Well, I think that I personally felt that I searched the surface of reality like a blind person, probing for a chink, an opening, a possibility in the seamless surface of the high walls that seem to hem us in, the prison of Gnostic iron that the Mandayans placed at the center of the universe. And the chink in the armor is this radiant otherness that is showing through the plants. And what it is, who knows? What it's for, who knows? But that it loves us, that it too is reaching up toward us, is self-evident. And how can we not respond to that? We don't know what reality is. We don't know who we are. We don't know where we are. We are lost, and this is beckoning light, warmth, affection, and understanding for the plight of humanity. Shamans have always healed their people and predicted the weather and predicted the movement of game and this sort of thing out of resonance with this greater mind in nature, which has sheltered the human family over millennia. I mean, it is the unseen partner. It is the goddess. It's a real thing. And now it must somehow be invoked operationally again because of our predicament as a result of having turned away from that. So the task is to understand all this, each in our own way, and then to communicate it to others, to understand each in their own way, and to build a dynamic consensus for life. For life. Because it's the only thing we know that has given us self-reflection. So, Nicole, do you have anything to say about that?
Well, I believe, Terence, that you have been given a much wider experience in this, a much more vivid and probably valuable experience than most people. Why is that? For example, most of the Indians I know have perhaps just not able to explain it or to talk about it. But most of them say, well, they saw a tigre and some snakes, or they went to a beautiful city, and much simpler understanding.
I think it's language.
Isn't it?
I think that
Very
every single one of these Indians has seen things no human soul ever saw before. That it's a richness of beauty before which one is inarticulate. As to why I can do it, well, maybe necessity is the mother of invention. I'm not a stockbroker. And we can always blame the Irish. But I don't like to do that because that shuts everybody else out. And I don't believe for a moment, and in fact I might say that, to me the important thing about this experience is I really believe that everyone can have it. That this is something almost, it's no exaggeration to compare it to sexuality. This is a potentiality in the human organism that if you go to the grave without knowing about this, it's rather equivalent to going to the grave with your virginity intact. This is an enormous area of what it is to be alive. I mean, and it blows my mind to think that the last 50 generations of people in Europe created all that philosophy and science and diplomacy and so forth and so on without a single person being stoned for a single moment all those centuries. I mean, it's pretty much gristle and beer, isn't it, folks, when you look at the accomplishments of European civilization. So I think it takes practice, though, to access these states, and I'll respond.
I was going to ask. Your initial experiences with anything like that?
My initial experiences were kind of funny. It always seemed to hit me very hard. I was thinking the other day of, for some reason I hadn't thought of it for years, I think I was remarking the anniversary of it or something, about the very, very first time that I took LSD. And I took it in someone's apartment in San Francisco. And for me, the world divided into two great polar opposites. And perhaps it's still true in some strange way. One side of the thing was called the Iostechs. And they were like God. They were everything profound. I mean, to utter this word was to hurl yourself on the ground and press your face into the dirt. It was like invoking a Faustian flame, miles in extent. That was the Iostechs. At the other polarity were this something called the Pinkestairs. And they were hilarity and elfin dissolution into the minute. And I was just hurled between the antipodes of these two crazed, concrescent concepts for about 14 hours. And very peculiar. But by techniques, what I wanted to say was, because it will be useful, I assume, to people here, you do it in darkness and in silence and in reverence, on an empty stomach, free from distraction, with attention to breath. That's all. Now, what do we see? What does this operationally look like? It looks like a person sitting alone in a dark room, quietly breathing or meditating or something like that. That's all you see. That's the exterior manifestation of the sadhana. And what is going on is this person is navigating an internal river system of great complexity. Syntactical Niagaras are pouring over internal precipices of perception and remembrance. And, it's very intense. I mean, I have had experiences where I swore that everybody from Seattle to San Diego must have just thrown themselves under their desks to escape the blast, and it was just happening between my ears, you know? I mean, it's like watching a thermonuclear explosion through 50 feet of absolutely clear crystal, and you know, you're in violet, but what's raging in the optical pathway is like the collapse of a universe, or the birth of a universe.
The first time you took ayahuasca, was it that intense?
No, it took years of fiddling with ayahuasca because they don't make it right. I won't take anybody's but my own, just because they're not heavy enough on the foot pedal of the Secotria. I think they want to.
That's it.
They want to graze the surface of it, and you know, I want impact. So I really push that because that's what fascinates me, the visions. I mean, some people say you're just a vision freak, that these wonderful feelings and thoughts, and it's true that all is there, but there is something so convincing to my mind about a hallucination, because it's so intricate and happening in real time. I mean, just looking at this thing jaw agape, you could never draw it, you could never have previously imagined it, and yet it must in some sense be said to be yours because it's happening in your mind. And so then you wonder, well, what is my relationship to this thing? It's the most beautiful thing I've ever seen. Did I make it? Does it come out of me? Or is it no more me than me standing looking at the evening star? What is the source of this transcendent beauty that resides within the human nervous system? I confess I don't have the answer. I think that's I am basically a Platonist, and then when you couldn't support that anymore because of advances in modern philosophy, I retooled as a phenomenologist, but I'm still basically a Platonist, and I believe that the good, the true, and the beautiful are somehow facets of the same notion. And for me, the pursuit of beauty has been the fastest way to get entangled with the true and the good. Now, for somebody else, it might be different. But this beauty that we find resident within ourselves is, I think, the strongest argument that I personally know of that we are more than clay, that we are, you know, caught up in a cosmic drama of salvation and redemption of some sort. I don't say what sort, I'm very leery of that, but that, you know, that we are caught up in a cosmic drama of salvation and redemption, and the covenant that she has made with human beings is symbolized by the psychedelic experience. In the same way that God's covenant with man was symbolized for Noah by the rainbow. You know, the psychedelic experience is the magical iridescence that is thrown off ordinary matter, vouchsafing some kind of insight into a transcendent level of organization that is behind appearance. Anybody want to say anything? Yeah.
I had a question. I wondered what role the psychedelics had in creating the differences between the religions that come out of the Orient and the ones that come out of the Middle East that are in tradition.
Well, as I wrote this book for Bantam and trying to study the relationship of drugs to culture over thousands of years in many places. And what I came to feel was that in a cultural situation where you have a strong plant hallucinogen, one of these pipeline to the goddess plants, women will tend to be in the powerful positions in the society because I'm convinced that women were the developers of language, that the gathering part of the hunting-gathering equation which was the women's part, had more evolutionary pressure on it to develop syntax in order to differentiate these hundreds and hundreds of plants, some toxic, some food. And I think that when the primal partnership society on the Saharan grasslands of Africa began to break up, it happened very slowly, you see. At the climax of the African cattle goddess mushroom partnership equilibrium, my supposition is that probably mushrooms were being taken every 2 weeks or month in a group situation with group sexual practices because of the CNS arousal component of the psilocybin being what was going on. Well, okay, so this is the experience that these people were building their civilization around, and it was an experience of boundary dissolution, tribal-mindedness, group sensuality, and group values. Well, as the African continent dried up, and this pastoral lifestyle became more and more difficult to support, and the distance between water holes over centuries, we're talking about, grew greater, it became harder and harder to hold these mushroom ceremonies on time, to have this experience regularly, to keep it part of the society, and eventually it died out. And there was also another factor working here, which was as the climate dried, it became more and more important to find a way to preserve the mushrooms so that they could be used then at the regular ceremonies. Well, the preferred agent for preservation, I discovered in the Neolithic, was honey. Well, the only problem with that is that honey itself is a natural product subject to fermentation. So as the mushrooms got scarcer and the climate drier, and there were more and more preserved mushrooms in honey, and then fewer and fewer preserved mushrooms in more and more honey, you got a slow switch over to a mead cult, an alcohol cult. And at that very early period in the Middle East, then you get the emergence of the dominator model. At 9,500 BC, from Scandinavia to Arabia, you get what's called the Tang Point Technocomplex. Means suddenly a lot of chipped flint, not distributed along river bottoms where game was frequent, but distributed on the wrong side of walls around former habitation sites. In other words, war has come to the world of 9,500 BC. This is because great agriculture over-succeeded. Surpluses meant sedentary lifestyles and defense of inventories. And suddenly there were people who had food and people who didn't have food, and a whole economy of pillage and strife emerged. So I'm really very unenamored of monotheism in all of its forms. I understand its philosophical attraction. One, it's the attraction of simplicity. Let there be one God. After all, isn't that the simplest solution? But taking a Jungian tack on that, we image in our personalities the kinds of gods that we permit ourselves to worship. And if you have an image of God as omnipotent, omnipresent, infallible, all-seeing, this is the dominator archetype incarnate. And then everyone images it in their psyche, and you get the birth of the ego. This thing, it's like a tumor that forms in the personality in the absence of psilocybin. In the absence of psilocybin, these assumptions begin to get going about my territory, my women, my food, and there's no end to it. It's the death of everything. So this long strain of dominator culture that comes out of the Middle East gets unfortunately reinforced, whether serendipitously or by design is not clear, by the choice of a phonetic alphabet to put down these early Middle Eastern languages. You see, phonetic alphabet gives tremendous permission for abstraction, because what is symbolized is not a little picture, not the thing, but the sound of the name of the thing. So you're 3 steps removed. It isn't enough that you communicate in symbols. Here you don't communicate in symbols. You communicate in a still 1 stage further removed thing. So, yeah, cultural styles are, I believe, drug-based, based on very old relationships with intoxicants. And it basically divides along 2 lines. The soporific, these things which loosen social strictures and give permission to express the dominator model, and then these other more nebulous, visionary kinds of things. So it's a suppression versus enhancement thing. This might be a good point to make the point, since there's so much talk about drugs in today's world, that the pro-psychedelic position is an anti-drug position. That should be clear. Because the way I think of drugs and what is objectionable about them is by analyzing cause and effect. Well, what is it that we don't like about drugs? Well, we don't like that they cause unexamined, repetitive, self-destructive behavior. In other words, they make you stupid and self-destructive and habitual on those items. Well, this is precisely the kind of behavior patterning that psychedelics break up and destroy. You cannot carry out unexamined, self-destructive, habitual behavior in the presence of psychedelics, because they will show you too strong an image of the consequences. You know, these amazing statistics that were reported with curing alcoholism with LSD before they made LSD illegal, where they would give chronic alcoholics one 500 gamma LSD trip with a sitter, and something like 60% of these people were going dry and sticking with it. Well, people said, my God, LSD is a cure for alcoholism. No, it's a cure for stupidity. It's not a cure for alcoholism. That's infantile. It merely gives you an image of the consequences of your behavior. And this image is so horrifying that you modify your behavior forthwith. Yes. Yeah.
It was with a mixed group. Yes. No. They don't think about it that way. People just go. People. Yes. Someone who has a problem, perhaps is hoping to solve it, and by finding out what happened to his wallet, or her string of pearls, or something like that. Of course, they don't very often wear pearls in that society, but it's a totally heterogeneous group. It's whoever happens to come, with the permission of the shaman, of course. I don't know, but there seem to be far fewer women who have taken it. No, I don't know why. The women usually take it when they're in tribal situations, in a culture. The ones who are not too acculturated usually take it when they are ill. And frequently it is a diagnostic tool for the shaman. He takes it with the woman, and then he knows where the evil dot is gone that is making her ill, and how to remove it.
But when I took over in an uncontrollable way, when I get an idea for form or painting or something like that, it's not something that I can control. And it's a similar process in that you go into a different experiential world. And I found that we can sit here and talk about this and we laugh about elves and things, but in the real world, people don't like it. It's like Main Street, we were talking about Main Street. If this happens to me and I feel like I really need to do my work because the news is there, I can't say, well, the news is here, I have to go pay. Somebody else has the garbage. People get angry at me and say, that's irresponsible. There's no place for an artist or a seer unless you've got, so you're Terence McKenna, so therefore it's okay for you to come off the wall because you're going to be funny and entertaining, but it's not okay for, any old person like me to do that.
You're about to get what you came for. Yes, it is. Yes, it is. Well, then you can do what I do. The reason I do this is because I lost my job, and, no, I mean, I see what you're saying. I mean, it is problematic. You know, if one person believes it, it's a psychosis. If two people, it's a folie à deux. 3, a cult. 4, a movement, and so on. What we're trying to do here is empower the mean. Give permission and say, you know,
Alright, I like that better with the shadows a bit softer. Okay, well that lays out the start of it, and we'll see where it develops from here. I'm liking the pattern and the lightness. So, yeah, right on. That's Adam Sturch podcasting from the Mushroom Mansion, Taos, New Mexico, working on oil painting as of yet unnamed. I'll try and come up with something before I post this. So, hey, have a good day, Earth.
And the